Hello and welcome to the Aussie Football Passport, your one-stop pod for updates on your favourite Aussie men and women who are playing their club careers abroad. I'm your host Alex, and we've got a whole sack of good and bad news to cover this week. I know. I don't want to bring it to you, but I've just got to do it. Anyway, there's the Matildas game against England, awards for a couple of our current Matildas, their return to club action, some fresh injuries to update you on, and how our lads went this week for their clubs. Without any further ado, let's get into it with the headlines. All right, let's start the headlines with the PFA Awards this week. And two of our ladies were awarded some very high honours for their work in the last year. Mary Fowler was the recipient of the Young Women's Footballer of the Year for a record third time. Fowler becomes the first player to win the award 3 times, which is voted for by PFA members. So that's her fellow players in Australia. The Matildas and Manchester City star previously won the award in 2022 and 2024. Now, in terms of the Women's Footballer of the Year, that award went to Steph Catley, and that is the second consecutive season for Steph. So congratulations to both Steph and Mary. Both have had wonderful years. It's pretty fair to say Steph Catley winning the Champions League with Arsenal, of course. Now on to some more sombre news for the Matildas. They went down to England last week 3-0. Alana Kennedy's 18th minute red card was the game changer, and unfortunately in the wrong way. Of course, we are used to seeing her in that centre-back role when it comes to Matildas, but in clubland recently for both of her, for her previous club in USA and her current club in England, the London City Lionesses, she has been moved into that holding midfield role. But of course, that's where she did play her junior football. So it's not a position she's unfamiliar with. It's one she's played quite a bit of. But unfortunately, Joe Montemurro moved her there for the game against England, and it's backfired spectacularly. You know, it's fair to say that, well, is it fair to say that she might have lost a spot after this? It's a very interesting one. We're not quite sure if that will be the case, but it certainly could be, especially considering the emergence of the likes of Winona Heatley, who's been playing well for her club Roma, and she seems to have formed a solid partnership with Claire Hunt across the 2 games against Wales and England in this international window that's just gone. And it could be some interesting calls coming for Joe Montemurro's squad in the next international window, which is at the end of November and early December. Now, getting back to the action, Sam Kerr played another hour of football on her road back from that long-term injury. She did look a bit rusty, it's fair to say, across both matches. So will she be able to shake off this rust by the time the Asian Cup rolls around? Well, you'd think so. And we'll have a little bit of a hint as to why that is the case later on in this episode. But look, in summary, it's pretty fair to say the girls were severely outclassed. Of course, a player down. We should note that in context. But we should also note that England are a world-class side, and unfortunately they put our girls to the sword in this one once that red card happened. There are a couple of positives, and I think the main one is Clare Wheeler in particular in that holding midfield role, and I think that's probably what Joe Montemurro will be doing in that next window. Clare Wheeler, I think it might be your spot to lose that holding midfield role. All right, now to that new segment that we introduced last week, injury news, and let's keep the theme going with our ladies. Unfortunately, Jada Wyman was ruled out of that Matildas squad over the last international window. There's no official news or timelines on that injury, unfortunately. So once the news comes to hand, we will update you in the next episode. Now, and some more positive news for our ladies. Emily Gilnick returned to her club side, CF Monterrey. She was an unused substitute on the weekend in her side's 2-1 victory over Atlas in the Mexican League. Now over to our lads, and Tony Popovic is sounding a bit like a psychic after Jordan Boss's injury last week. He said that he expected more, and boy, oh boy, did he get it. Alessandro Circati went down with a potential ankle injury. He was subbed off late in the first half of Parma's game on the weekend against Bologna. So initial reports out of Italy are stating that it is a sprained ankle. So fingers crossed it is only that sprained ankle for Ali's sake. Of course, he had that horrendous ACL injury that kept him out for 9 months in the previous 12 months. Now, speaking of centre-backs, Leicester City coach Marti Cifuentes has stated that Harry Souttar is closing in on a return from injury. How good is that? The club has taken their time with his recovery, where he has been on the pitch for the last 4 to 5 weeks and is now close to rejoining group training. So fantastic news for Harry there, and we cannot wait to see him back in a Leicester City jersey in no time. Now, Jed Drew, he is currently out with a back injury. His side, Hartberg, has reported there is no return date as yet. And of course, we will keep you updated on that one. Now, as for Ryan McGowan, he continues to work his way back to full fitness after that nasty infection that has kept him out for about 7 to 8 weeks. I think it's totaled up to now. His side, Livingston, have been going through a tough run without him marshalling their defence. And of course, he is their captain as well. He goes into a bit of detail in the Rosed FC podcast. If you are interested, well worth checking it out. Hopefully you don't have a queasy stomach, because there are a couple of details that might upset you there if that's the case. Now, to Jacob Italiano, he's picked up a calf injury with a return date unknown at this time. Very unfortunate news for Jacob. He's been getting regular game time in Austria for his side at Grazer AK. It looked like he had cemented his spot in Popper's plans, of course, playing both games against Canada and the USA in that last international window for the Socceroos. However, it might open the door for Fran Karasic to return to the squad, of course. He dropped out of the last 2 Socceroos squads due to injury, but will lightning strike 3 times in a row for Fran? We shall find out in the next week or so. Now, speaking of fullbacks, Jacob Farrell, he's continuing to work his way back into the side for Portsmouth. He had a setback with his injuries lately, his coach John Musinho stated recently. So fingers crossed we can see Jacob back on the pitch sooner rather than later. Now, one last injury to round out this new unfortunate segment. According to Vought Balkrant, Ryan Teague recently underwent surgery on his meniscus. They're stating a recovery time of 6 to 7 weeks for the midfielder. So unlucky for Ryan. He looked like he was emerging as a potential midfield option for the Socceroos, particularly that performance against China sticks in the mind. But injury and this move to Belgium hasn't quite worked out as of yet. Let's hope once he's recovered from injury, he can return to his side, KV Mechelen's starting lineup. But that is it for the headlines for this week. We'll move on to the weekly wrap in just a moment. All right, weekly wrap time, and let's start with our ladies in the US&A, where Mackenzie Arnold and Caitlin Torpey both started for the Portland Thorns, Arnold playing the full game and Torpey playing 67 minutes as they helped their side keep a clean sheet in a 2-0 win over the Houston Dash. Courtney Vine, she came off the bench and played 21 minutes in North Carolina Courage's 3-2 win over Gotham FC. However, unfortunately, results elsewhere meant Courage miss out on a playoff by a single point. Can you believe it? Poor Courtney and her teammates. That is an unfortunate end to their season in the US&A. Now over to Sweden, where Daniela Galic picked up an assist and continued her hot streak. She started and played 89 minutes for her side Vizio in their 2-1 win over AIK. As mentioned earlier, Jada Vyman is out injured for AIK. Now to Kristianstad, who were defeated 4-2 by Djurgården. Djurgården scored all 4 of their goals in the first half. Can you believe it? Kristianstad's made 3 changes at halftime, which included introducing our girls Remy Simpson and Amy Sayer, but they weren't able to overcome the significant deficit in that one. They did manage to score 2 goals, however. It means that the highest Kristianstad can finish in the Swedish league is 5th place. And of course, that means missing out on a European spot, as we mentioned last week in our show. Courtney Nevin, she started and played the full game for Malmo in their 2-1 loss to Pattaya. It now means that Malmo are out of the title race. So unfortunately news for Courtney and her teammates. Of course, Courtney in some red hot form of late, both in green and gold and for Malmo, but just wasn't enough at the weekend for her side. In a battle of the Aussies in Sweden, Avi Lewis, BK Hacken beat Polydorans Linköping 4-0. Both of our ladies played the full game for their respective sides. Now let's head to England, where Chelsea defeated the London City Lionesses 2-0 in their first WSL derby. Of course, after the London City Lionesses were promoted for this season. Ellie Carpenter scored early to give the Blues the lead before Sam Kerr sealed the result in stoppage time with a goal from outside the penalty area, catching the keeper off her line. So talking about Sam Kerr shaking off that rust, I think that's a pretty good example of it there. Kerr replaced Carpenter in the 74th minute as the striker continues to build her match minutes. Alana Kennedy was an unused substitute for the Lionesses in that one. Katrina Gorry, she played the full match in midfield for West Ham in their 1-0 loss to Manchester City to continue their horrific start to the WSL season, where they are yet to win a match. Clare Wheeler, she played the full game in midfield for Everton in their incredible 3-3 draw with Aston Villa. Arsenal had a convincing 4-1 victory over Leicester City. Caitlin Ford and Steph Catley started for Arsenal, with Ford playing 57 minutes and Catley playing the full game, whilst Kyra Cooney-Cross was excluded from the matchday squad with illness. Emily Van Egmond came off the bench at halftime for Leicester City and picked up the assist for their goal. Claire Hunt played the full game at centre-back for Tottenham in their 2-1 win over Liverpool. Speaking of horrendous starts to the season, Liverpool also haven't won a game in the WSL so far this season. Charlotte Grant was an unused substitute for Tottenham in that one. Charlize Rule played the full game for Brighton and Hove Albion in their unfortunate 3-2 loss to Manchester United, who came from behind in that one. Now to France, where Tegan Micah started in goal for the first time for her side as they kept a clean sheet, Lyon that is, in a 1-0 win over Paris FC. Now to Germany, where Jamila Rankin played the full game in defence for Hoffenheim in their 2-1 loss to Wolfsburg. Hayley Rasso was a second-half substitute for Frankfurt, playing 19 minutes as they ran out comprehensive victors 4-0 over Hamburg SV. Now to round out the action for our ladies in Italy, where Winona Hitley played the full game for Roma in their comfortable 3-0 win over Inter Milan. Jessica Nash played the full game in defence for Sassuolo, while Jacinta Galabaracci came off the bench in the second half and played 13 minutes for Sassuolo as they were unfortunately defeated by Fiorentina 1-0. Now let's head over to men's action and start in England and Wales with the Championship. Cameron Burgess played all of Swansea City's 3-1 loss to Manchester City in the League Cup. Apologies, I should have said League Cup. There was League Cup action in midweek. He then backed it up with a full game as Swansea City drew 1-1 with Charlton Athletic in league action in the Championship on the weekend. Nesiri Irankunda came on in the 70th minute for Watford as they beat Middlesbrough 3-0 on the weekend. Riley McGree received his first minutes of the season, 21 to be exact, in some very positive news apart from Middlesbrough's heavy defeat there. Sam Silvera was on the bench and was an unused substitute. Hayden Matthews played 82 minutes for Portsmouth as they lost 4-0 to Birmingham City. Ouch. Lewis Miller played the full game for Blackburn in their 2-0 win over Leicester City on the weekend. Now, let's drop down a division, although we are still talking some EFL Cup action initially, where Alex Robertson was substituted on, in the 66th minute of Cardiff City's 2-1 win against Wrexham in round 4 of the EFL Cup, which means they progress to the next stage, of course. He then played until the 71st minute as Cardiff City lost 1-0 to Peterborough United in League One action. Joe Gauci started in goal for Port Vale as they downed Maldon and Tiptree 5-1 in the FA Cup. Rafael Borges Rodriguez came on at the start of extra time in Winged Athletics' FA Cup penalty win over Hemel Hempstead. The game ended 1-1 after extra time, with Wigan winning 5-3 in the penalty shootout. Now let's head north of the border to Scotland, where Martin Boyle was subbed on in the 64th minute of Hibernian's 1-0 loss to Rangers. Jack Iredale played the full game in that one. And then at the weekend, Martin Boyle scored in Hibernian's 2-2 draw, with Livingston playing 73 minutes. It was the attacker's 5th goal of the season. Jack Iredale played 57 minutes for Hibs. Tete Yangi played 17 minutes for Livingston. And of course, Ryan McGowan is still out injured for Livingston. Cameron Devlin played a full game for Hearts as they drew 2-2 with St Mirren in midweek action. Keanu Bacchus played 75 minutes for St Mirren in that one. Cameron Devlin then played all of Hearts' 4-0 win over Dundee FC. The midfielder was at the heart of everything, completing 99 of his 109 passes in that one. Now, Apostolos Stamatolopoulos picked up an assist after coming on in the 64th minute for Motherwell as they defeated Dundee United 2-0. Johnny Katrumbis played the full game for Motherwell, whilst Oscar Priestman was an unused substitute. Zach Sapsford played the full game for Dundee United. Now, full circle, and let's head back to Keanu Bacchus, who played until the 71st minute of St Mirren's 4-1 win against Motherwell on the weekend. Apostolos Stamatolopoulos played 65 minutes for Motherwell, with Johnny Katrumbis getting 65 minutes and Oscar Priestman being an unused substitute. And that game was a League Cup encounter, a semi-final to be exact. Alessandro Ciccardi scored a late consolation for Parma in their 2-1 loss to Roma. It was his first goal in the Serie A. Can you believe it? But then again, he is a defender. However, he was substituted off in the 40th minute in his side's 3-1 loss to Bologna on the weekend, as mentioned earlier in the pod. Now we're off to Germany, where Connor Metcalf played 81 minutes for St. Pauli as they beat Hoffenheim on penalties in round 2 of the DFB Pokal, or German Cup. Jackson Irvine was on the bench for that one. The game ended 2-2 after extra time and then ended 8-7 on penalties. So quite the shootout. Their fortunes quickly changed at the weekend, however, as Connor Metcalf came on after 55 minutes of St. Pauli's 4-0 loss to Borussia Mönchengladbach on the weekend. However, in the most positive news of a 4-0 loss, Jackson Irvine was substituted on in the 85th minute for his side. Now to Spain, where Matt Ryan was in goal and played the full game for Levante in the 2-1 loss to Celta Vigo on the weekend. Was on the bench in Copa del Rey action. But speaking of the Copa del Rey, Alamabil played 86 minutes for his side Castellon in their 1-0 loss to CA Antoniano. Now to Croatia, where Fran Karacic and Anthony Kalic started Hajduk Split's penalty shootout win over Cibalia in the Croatian Cup. Karacic played 105 minutes and Kalic played 62 minutes. The game was 0-0 after extra time and finished 4-2 in Hajduk Split's favour. Fran Karacic was then substituted on in the 84th minute of Hajduk Split's 0-0 draw with Slaven. Anthony Kalic played from the 75th minute onwards. Now to the Netherlands, where Max Ballard played a full game for NAC Breda in their 4-1 loss to Heracles Almelo in the Dutch Cup in midweek action. He then backed it up with 90 minutes in his side's 1-0 win over the Go Ahead Eagles. Yes, that is a real team name, I kid you not, in the Netherlands. So a great win there for Max Ballard's side. Now, of course, you will note that I didn't make mention of a certain player from Heracles Alamello. There's a little hint on our men's player of the week, so stay tuned for that one. Now to Austria, where Marco Tilio came on after 78 minutes of Rapid Wien's 2-1 loss to Sturm Graz. Noah Botic played an hour of Austria Wien's 2-1 loss to Hartberg, who, of course, have Jedru absent with that back injury. Now to Denmark, where Mohamed Toure came on at halftime, replacing his brother Musa, as Randers lost on penalties to Eisbjerg in the DBU Pokalen in midweek, or the Danish Cup for us English speakers. Unfortunately for Mo Toure, he missed his penalty in the shootout as they lost 4-2 after a 0-0 draw after extra time. Paul Itzo was on the bench in that game. However, fortunes turned around for Mohamed Toure and he followed in his brother's footsteps, or did Al Hassan Toure follow in his brother's footsteps? Not quite sure, because Al Hassan scored a hat-trick for Sydney FC, and I'll stop my rambling and get back to Mohamed Toure, who scored both of Randers' goals in their 3-2 loss to Viborg in the league on the weekend. He played 86 minutes in that one. That takes Mo Toure's tally to 4 goals for the campaign for his side. Pulso was in goal for Randers and played the full game, while Musa Toure was an unused substitute in that one. Now let's head north to Norway, where Nick D'Agostino was subbed on in the 77th minute of Vikings' 2-1 win against Strømsgodset. Gianni Stensnes came on at half time in that one. Now, let's round it out with some playoff action in the USA and Canada. Aidan O'Neill's New York City defeated Charlotte FC 1-0 in midweek action last week. O'Neill played a full game and completed 40 of his 41 passes in midfield. Archie Goodwin played 13 minutes off the bench for Charlotte FC. He then played so let's go back to Aidan O'Neill, who then played all of New York City's penalty defeat to Charlotte FC in the second of that 3-game series, which now means it goes down to a decider, of course, to determine who progresses to the next round. Archie Goodwin played 46 minutes in this game that went to extra time before the penalties. It was 0-0 after 120 minutes and ended 7-6 in the penalty shootout in Charlotte FC's favour. Now, Patrick Yazbek, he played 79 minutes as Nashville overcame Inter Miami 2-1 in their second match of their 3-match playoff series. It means the series goes to game 3 also, and there is therefore the potential for an all-Aussie shootout in the next round of the MLS. So we will keep you posted in next week's pod. All right, that is it for the weekly wrap. Let's head over to Players of the Week shortly. Players of the Week time. And let's start with our Women's Player of the Week. And judging by the performances this week, we could have gone with a couple of Aussie goal scorers in the form of Sam Kerr or Ellie Carpenter for Chelsea. But we've decided to go with Morgan Aquino, as she made 8 saves for her side, DC Power, who defeated Dallas Trinity 3-2. Not only were there 8 saves in that performance, but some absolutely crucial ones to help her side to victory in that one. DC Power are now 3 points away from the top 4 and a playoff spot. So fingers crossed for DC Power, so we can see Morgan Aquino get some more minutes and push her case for a starting goalkeeping role in the Matildas, although it's going to be pretty hard to take it off Tegan Micah or Mackenzie Arnold, you'd imagine. All right, now to our men's player of the week. And we did allude to this man earlier in the show, and unfortunately, I don't have any prizes to give away as yet. I'll work on some merch or something like that. But if you got this one right, well done. It is Aden Hrustic, who scored for Heracles Alamello and played a full game in their stunning victory over NAC Breda in the Dutch Cup. It was 4-1, that victory. Now, keep in mind that Heracles Alamello are dead last in the Eredivisie, or the Dutch league. the top flight. So the threat of relegation is real, which meant that their coach got sacked prior to this game, the Dutch Cup game, and the interim coach was installed. But then he went on to continue his outstanding form, and it's why he's got our Men's Player of the Week. He grabbed 2 assists as his side. Just get ready. I hope you're sitting down when you listen to this, because Heracles Alamello defeated PEC's Volley 8-2. 8-2, yes, that's correct. 8-2, 10 goals. Just a friendly reminder that football isn't always boring, okay? But yes, it is a timely reminder to Tony Popovic in regards to the talents of Adam Trustic, our midfield maestro, and we are a big fan of him here at the Aussie Football Passport. Well, that is it for another week of the Aussie Football Passport. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And a big thank you to everyone that has rated the show or interacted with the show. I know a couple of our avid listeners have done so this last week, so really appreciate that. And if you want to get embarrassed, I will mention you in next week's show, but I won't do it this week, just in case. Just make sure you also follow us on social media. We are on X, Facebook, and Instagram. Make sure you leave those reviews as well. We still are sitting on 5 reviews in total, 3 on Spotify and 2 on Apple Podcasts. Get reviewing, and it means that I will bring you those bonus episodes. However, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode. It's goodbye for now.